So lots of stories out there about M1 machines, both the MacBooks and the Minis, prematurely wearing out their SSD drives. Reports of people only having the machine for maybe 2 months and seeing 5 to 10% SSD wear, which is obviously a bit of a nightmare. Now, I'm pretty sure that you're not getting this problem, and I want to give you the tools and the knowledge so that you can look at it for yourself so that you're not trapped by fear. As is my normal way, I'll try and make this tutorial based and practical, and I won't be doing glitz. In section 1, we'll talk about the triple layer cell technology that's used in the internal SSDs on the M1 machines. We'll discuss why writing to these cells reduces their life and therefore puts a total life expectancy on the SSD as a whole. In section 2, we will download and demonstrate the use of the Smart Montools package, which will allow you to do self-monitoring on the wear rate of your SSDs. In section 3, we'll look at using the standard activity monitor tools that are delivered with Mac OS. Maybe you don't want to download a specialist tool, and I'll show you how you can get some clues to your write rates to internal SSD using these tools. So section 1, we're going to talk a little bit about the theory behind how an SSD works. So effectively what it is a chargeable cell which can store a voltage. So this thing has got, if you like, within the silicon some terminals, and by passing current through it we can effectively put charge in it, a bit like you charging a battery. Okay, now if this is a single level cell, we really can interpret 2 voltage levels. High voltage would be a 1, low voltage would be a 0. So there we have, if you like, a binary way of storing data, a 0 or a 1, either low charge or high charge. And I think you can imagine that, let's say for example we can charge this thing up to 5 volts. Anything above 2.5 volts we can interpret as a 1, and anything below 2.5 volts we would interpret that as a 0. This thing is either charged or it's not charged, and it's a reasonable simple decision to make. Now the cells have a oxide layer which effectively insulates them and stops them from leaking their charge away. What we don't want to happen is either a charge to leak into it by accident and maybe turn a 0 into a 1, or charge to leak out of it by accident and degrade the data of a 1 into a 0. You would be corrupting your files by doing that. Now, every time we read the cell by passing a voltage or applying a voltage between these terminals, the electrical properties of that circuit are changed by the very charge that exists in the cell. And by reading the cell in doing this, we don't disturb the charge at all. Now, if we want to change the state of the cell by rewriting the data, overwriting the data, then we can turn a 1 into a 0, and we can change the state of charge down to a lower level, or turn a 0 into 1 and put it up to a higher level. Now, every time we do that, we go through this oxide layer, and in doing that we degrade the quality of that insulation just a little bit on a write cycle. And it's this that slowly wears out an SSD. It's the wearing out of that really good insulator which allows the charge to be protected inside the cell and non-corruptible. But because we've got quite a range of error here, you know, anything above halfway is a 1 and anything below halfway is a 0. So single level cells, easy decision. It's either charged or it isn't charged. Quite hard to corrupt. It's going to have long life and quite fast to access. In the modern SSDs that are used on the MacBooks, these are TLC cells. They are triple level cells, and that means that they effectively can express 3 bits of data, not just 1 bit. Now, the advantage here is that per cell we can express much more data, so the SSD is going to be cheaper, but unfortunately it won't last as long. And the reason for this is as follows. If you've got 3 bits of data, the total possibilities of that data are as follows. I'm just counting through my binary and they are my states, if you like, possible states. You'll notice that there are 8 combinations there if you've got 3 bits. So for us to express 3 bits in something that we can charge, let's say imagine we can charge it from 0 to 5 volts, then we have to interpret those different states by 8 different voltages. So this would be, if you like, 111, a high voltage close to 5, and this would be 000, a low voltage close to 0, and then you would have the granularity of voltages, everything in between. Now, can you see that once we've established a state of charge, let's imagine the state of charge is there, this would be this one here, we meant this to be a 101, then if we have any error in that charge, and only a small error is required, if we damage, you remember I spoke about this insulating layer that lives here and there and stops the cell voltage from disappearing, if we decay that charge just slightly, whereas before with a single level cell it didn't matter, with this cell that needs to express 8 individual quantas of voltage, a small change will corrupt the data into something else. And so we're more bothered about the rate at which we decay the protecting oxide layer. So that brings us to understanding why a cell degrades its performance by writing to it. Continuous writes causes a problem with cell life. The more data density we put within the cells, then the shorter the prospective life of that NAND will be. Now, research shows that Apple in general use quite a lot of Toshiba NAND memory in their devices. Now, that's not wholly true, and if you refer to the link below, there's an excellent document by the iFixit guys where they tear down both an M1 MacBook Pro machine and an M1 Air machine, and they find Toshiba memory in the Pro and SanDisk Western Digital memory in the Air. So it's not true to say that Apple only use one kind of storage device from one manufacturer. There's a reason why historically there's a little bit of affinity between Apple and Toshiba. The reason for that is that in 2018 Apple invested in the Toshiba company and bought shares in it, and effectively there was a consortium formed to stop Western Digital spending its money and buying the whole of Toshiba. So it was kind of one of these anti-competitive things. Now later on things changed, and you might be aware that the Toshiba memory company became a company called Kioxia, is how you pronounce it, Kioxia, and this company really was bought back, and the consortium that had invested into it was exited, and the old Toshiba memory company was refinanced using Japanese bank capital, and that's the time at which the rebranding took place. For this reason, you can expect to see any kind of SSD memory in these machines, but in general there are going to be TLC devices so that we can get the correct amount of bang for buck. It is considered that somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 writes are possible without degrading the performance of the cells beyond their warranty, if you like, a limitation. And in general, a warranty is somewhere between 3 to 5 years. So you can see that essentially we are only expecting to rewrite a cell 1,000 times a year, if you like. Now that might not seem a lot to you, but what helps us with this is this thing called wear leveling. Now wear leveling is done inside the controller chip. So each NAND device has built into it a controller, and I don't know why we still draw discs as discs, but I mean, there is nothing disky about a NAND SSD device. I'm going to draw it as a disk. Now, in the old days of disk drives, and I worked on the old mechanisms from Hewlett-Packard 7933s, 7925s. I mean, a 7925 from memory was 125 megabytes, and it was the size of a washing machine. And these things had multiple platters, so the platters were kind of this diameter, about that diameter, and maybe 4 or 6 platters, I can't remember, in the whole carousel that you pulled out. And each platter was double-sided, and therefore there was 2 heads per platter, and there was a top head and a bottom head, and these heads would move in and out. And by far the slowest thing to do on a disk drive like that is to move the heads. And so you wanted your files to be continuous on the disk drive. The way it would work is we would have to move the heads to where the file is. We would then read all of the data on a track, and then if you wanted more data, the next best place to go would be the head underneath by doing an electronic head switch, because we would write all over the top, then the bottom, then the top of the next platter, then the bottom of that. By doing this, we're not having to physically move the heads. And so we wanted our files to be continuous, effectively in cylinders, actually. The profile of a continuous file was cylindrical on the disk drive. So this is old styley. Now, in the modern era of electronic memory, it doesn't really matter where your data is. You can dot your data all over the disk drive, because it's just as fast to get it from one place as it is to get it from another. There is no mechanics in reading the data. So what write where leveling does is, if you continue to write the same file over and over again, the controller will automatically go and put the modified version of the file somewhere else. It spreads the load over all of the cells. You can no longer look at a piece of SSD and go, oh, my file lives just there, because in reality it will live all over the file system. Therefore, the bigger the disk, the more writes you can do to it before you wear it out. The higher the disk capacity, the more writes you're able to do. It is a benefit to have a larger SSD than you might really need, because that SSD will have more write life. Now, is this a problem for you or not? Well, I'm going to give you the numbers, the basis of the numbers, so that you can work out whether these issues are real or not for you. So this brings us on to discussing 2 terms about SSD wear, which is total bytes written, TBW, total bytes written, and also, and probably more importantly, drive writes per day. So how much data can we on average write to an SSD without overusing it and causing those wear problems? Effectively, to stay within guarantees or warranties, the factor is about 0.3 multiplied by the capacity of the drive to get to drive writes per day. So here I've got MacBook Pro with a 1 terabyte drive in it. So 1 terabyte multiplied by the 0.3 factor. We're not being optimistic here. This is a reasonable, conservative and pessimistic factor. And that would mean that we could write 300 gigabytes per day to this drive without expecting to overuse it, you know, a 10-year lifespan as expected. The manufacturer warranties these drives between 3 to 5 years. You know, you buy a car, it's got a 1 year or a 3 year warranty, or that's not to say that the thing stops working after the manufacturer's warranty lifetime. We're going to expect to see a good 10 years out of this if we're doing this kind of total drive writes per day. Now, if you've bought maybe the base level MacBook Pro or MacBook Air, that has a 256 gigabyte SSD in it, and because it's smaller and there's less area in the disk to do wear leveling, then it's going to support less total drive writes per day. Again, that multiplied by 0.3 is equal to about 75 gigabytes per day. You might think, well, why would I write 300 gigabytes a day? I mean, I do a lot of video editing. I mean, it's conceivable that I might, but quite difficult to do that every day of the machine's life. One of the worries that people have is if their machines are under memory pressure and there's lots of memory management going on by the MacBook or the Mac 1 Mini, the M1 machines have got quite small memories in terms of RAM, 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes. If we put the machine under lots of memory pressure, the theory is that it can start to do lots of writing to the swap space, trying to bring programs in and out and make room for everything, and to keep the machine running effectively, and that would start trashing the swap space and might increase the level of writing to the disks. I can't show on my machines that that's happening. I'm going to show that to you later. It's more of a fear, I would say, than it is a reality. So total drive writes per day, 0.3 times your capacity. If you're writing over that per day, then unfortunately you're probably going to be reducing the life expectancy of your SSD. If you keep within those kind of figures, no worries. So let's have a look at our machines and find out just what level of drive writes per day we've been doing. And now the best way of doing this is with a bespoke tool which is called SmartMon Tools, which we're going to need to download from the internet and install it. It's a really small package of a couple of programs, so we're going to get that from smartmontools.org. I'll put the link down in the notes. So let's go there. You'll see the smartmon.tools website. We want to do a download, and we're looking for the OS X package, the precompiled package. So let's go and get that. The DMG image, which is what we want the installer for Mac OS, is going there. This is safe software, by the way, so don't worry about downloading it. You'll notice that we're taking version 7.2.1, so let's download that. There it is. Let's run it and kick it off. Now it's not going to let me do that because it's saying I'm not going to let you do that easily, so right click that and do an open implicitly, and then it will give you the choice there to open. So do that. That's going to install the software. Continue, agree. It's going to take 4.7 megabytes, hardly a large tool. Install the software, and it goes, it's done. Let me show you where it is. We can get rid of that now. If you go to your bring up a terminal window, and where this is going to be is you want to change directory to /usr/local/sbin. So that's cd to usr local sbin. Let's just do a pwd. Yes, we're definitely there. Happy days. If you do an ls-l, let's see what's in there. You can see now that we've got two programs called SmartCTL and SmartD. We're just going to use SmartCTL. So SmartCTL is going to interrogate the disk drive and pull out the usage stats for that disk drive. But we need to know what the disk drive is called. So the way we're going to do that is go into the Apple insignia up the top here, do an About This Mac, do a system report. Then when you get that in this hardware area, go to storage, and then find this BSD name, which is the name of your boot disk basically, and that's called disk what we got, disk 3S5 in my case. So the device file name for this disk drive is /dev/disk 3S5. That's the name of the device file, which basically points to the hardware of the SSD on my machine. So the command that I'm going to be running is ./smart/ctl -a/dev/disk 3S5. Okay, / just means run the program from the current directory, because as you can see, that's where it is. So ./smart/ctl -a/dev/disk 3S5. Okay, do that. and we get a load of information, but really all we need is a couple of things. We have got 100% of our spare pool available to us. The spare pool of cells is where we can go to if these cells get damaged by overuse, and we haven't used any of those. And the reason we haven't used any of those on here, we're also reporting a 0% usage of this disk drive in terms of its warranted life. That's kind of encouraging. And to be in more detail, we can see here now the real information we want from this is the total bytes written. That's ever since this disk existed in this machine. It's had a total of let's call it 4.5 terabytes. 4.5 terabytes to this disk since it started, which is equal to 4,500 gigabytes total writes. You can reboot the machine. This metric is going to live on and on. It's basically a metric from the life of the whole disk drive. Okay, happy days. So I've had this machine pretty much since these were released. That's more than 4 months ago. 4 months multiplied by 30 days per month. That's 120 days, isn't it? So effectively we've done 4,500 gigabytes divided by 120 days. You'll have to forgive me because I'm useless at maths. So 4,500 gigabytes divided by 120 days equals 37 gigabytes. We'll call it 38 gigabytes a day. So I've been writing, my drive writes per day is equal to 38 gigabytes or whatever. When we did the conservative measure of what would be the supportable maximum, the sensible maximum, that was 300 gigabytes per day would be okay. And I'm factor of 10 away from that. 3 to 5 year warranty based on write rate. Well, we could multiply that by 10 in my case. I'm not going to wear this SSD out for 30 to 50 years. I'm 57. I don't get 30 to 50 years potentially. I might get 50. I might get 30, but I'm pretty sure I won't be using this machine when I'm 87. So it's not a problem for me, is it? And I'm pretty sure it's not going to be a problem for you either. It's just that lots of people like to jump on these Apple hate bandwagons. I don't need to have an opinion about what people write. I just like to find out for myself. And now I've shown you how to find out for yourself. Let's give you an alternative way of doing this without having to download any tools. To do this, let's run the activity monitor. This is the standard Mac OS activity monitor. Go over to disk. You can see that I've got 63 gigabytes of data written. Well, since when? Well, since the machine was last booted. These metrics get reset every time you boot the machine. So the next thing I need to know is how long has the machine been up. So if you run the uptime command, you'll see that my machine has been up for 2 days. Well, and that's reasonable, isn't it? Because that's about 31.5 gigabytes per day, which is in reasonable agreement with the accurate way of doing it, which has been looking at the disk for all of its use. This number is for all writes to all disks for all purposes. So for example, if I put my backup disk in and did a huge Time Machine backup, that would be counted in the writes. And it's not even the internal SSD. That in a backup scenario, we would be reading the internal SSD, which has no effect on its wear, and writing to the Time Machine backup location. And of course, that would be counted here as writes. So it's unlike the Smart Mon tool that I showed you earlier, Smart Control. It's not looking at a particular disk. Well, I've only got one disk on this machine and I haven't been doing a backup. So that's actually a reasonable approximation for me right now over the last 2 days of uptime. So hopefully I've been able to get this out there to you so that you can put your own mind at rest. If you're seeing much more than what I'm seeing, which is 35, maybe 50 gigabytes of writing per day, maybe you've got cause for concern. concern. You know, maybe you've got a program that's got a memory leak. That's a program which slowly but surely is getting bigger in memory as more variables and tables and shared memory areas are being allocated, and the program for some reason isn't releasing them. These things just become bigger and bigger in memory. It's a bit like me drinking too much wine and eating during lockdown. You know, I'm just getting bigger and bigger, and that's just not good for anybody, and it's certainly not good for your memory machine. So in that situation, maybe the machine's doing a high degree of swapping. If that is the case, you know, that is cause for concern, but I've given you a way of measuring that. We do have to say also that the smaller your disk is, like for example the base 256 gigabyte SSD, then that will support less writes over time before we start to wear it out. So in that situation, we look back earlier and we said that a 256 gigabyte machine with the smallest possible SSD would support 75 gigabytes of writes per day without being a concern for warranty life. And you can see that even on my machine, even on a larger 1 terabyte SSD, I'm not writing even half of that warranted write level. Hopefully this has been useful to you. Please put in the comments, what are your numbers? I'm really interested in finding out from people what is our kind of sample if we take people that are looking at the channel, and thank you for your support. Give me a comment. Tell me if you've been having this issue, if you're seeing big numbers of writes per day, you know, something over the 50 gigabytes. Please do let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, thank you.